Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. I am your host, Dane Waters. It was great talking to Stephanie and talking about the importance of worlds and nations cooperating. But one thing she pointed out, as we talked about, is the importance of an educated workforce and brain drains and just making sure. Listen, you can't trade. You can't if you have nothing to if you don't produce anything. If you don't produce anything, if you don't have the right people to produce something, you can't produce it. So education and an educated workforce is important, which is why we have our next guest, Akin Olu-Philips. I understand is the guru on Nigeria's education and what the future holds. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Morning. So let's talk about what is the current state of Nigeria's. I think we had a little freeze right there, so I apologize for that. So tell us, what is the current state of the Nigeria's education system?
Okay, currently we are work in progress. I'll put it that way. We've made some efforts in times past, and due to a lot of reasons and issues within the system, we are still evolving. Actually, we're not there yet because there are so many orders to be crossed. There are so many things to be done which haven't been done until now. Interestingly, there has been very strong effort on the part of the current government towards evolving us into the kind of education system that works. Because usually before now, we've all had go to school, come out of school, get a good job. It has been the pattern pre or post the colonial era when independence was given to the country, where everybody felt it was very important that you had to go to school. And that was the rush then. However, we are starting to realize that we need to take into cognizance our cultural disposition for us to be able to have an effective educational system that works for us as a people. So I think that's where we're getting to gradually, looking at what the current government has just introduced, which is the dots. We need to get the data correctly to know where we are, and then we need to be able to now provide solutions to getting us to where education will actually work for our country, because it's the bedrock of building a very strong and structural country.
No, I agree. Definitely, education, an educated workforce, an educated people, an educated class is definitely the cornerstone and bedrock to any society. But when we talk about education, let's break it down. I mean, you have to basically you educate kids from what we call in the United States from kindergarten all the way through to your doctorate degrees. In Nigeria, where is the weak link now? Is it in primary school? Is it secondary school? Or help us understand where the problems are.
Okay, predominantly, I think we always run into the problem within our secondary school sector. From the primary level, everybody enrolled their children. And I think at the point of moving to the secondary school, we have a lot of dropouts at that point, basically for economic reasons and so many other reasons. But within the secondary sector, the mode and manner in which education is passed on tends to frustrate attempts to going further or to really knowing what education is. There's a point where we get literate. Yeah, you know how to read and how to write. However, being educated to take you to the next level in times in where in turn you'll be able to add value to the society. That's where the crux of the matter is. The secondary sector seems to be the bedrock of this, because that's what determines where you go into eventually.
So let me understand. So when you talk about secondary education in Nigeria, what age are we talking about?
Okay, we're talking between the ages of 11 to 18. Thereabout,
Okay.
11, 17, thereabout.
So what you're saying is that when people get to the age of 11 to 12, you have a drop off. They don't continue their education. So it's not compulsory in Nigeria that education continue to secondary?
It is compulsory. However, for public sector schools, it is compulsory. But for cultural reasons, a lot of parents feel if you've gone to primary school, which is extremely free, because free education is something that we have promoted from that primary level all through to the secondary level. However, parents start taking decisions based on their disposition as to finances. That, okay, you've gone to primary school already, you can read and write, you can learn this, you can learn that. However, what the new government is introducing is going to help us to curb that, because At that point, that's when parents start saying, you go learn a trade. Forget about secondary education. Go learn this particular trade. And those trades are predominantly within the informal sector, which cannot, which is not too useful and strong for the society. They need that education whereby when you go into learning a trade, the entrepreneurial knowledge that you need is very key and it's very important. And that you could get within the classroom sector, within the walls of the classroom, which is why it's very important that at that point, we don't lose them to just go into the street to learn one trade or the other. Then at that point, they also lose the literacy they must have acquired within the primary sector.
Interesting. So you're saying that this current president, President Tinubu and his administration, is doing a good job on helping increase educational standards in the country?
Oh yeah, they are. They are. The policies are good. One of the major challenges I noticed about policies is that implementation becomes very key. A policy may be fantastic on paper. However, those that will implement it, the operators and those that will make it function and make it work, they also must be properly schooled. For example, the new policy, I'm not sure it has been broken down to that point where everybody understands where this particular government is going. And that's where communication comes in. When government gives a policy or introduces a policy, we need people that can crystallize it down to the point where every stakeholder understand the nitty-gritty of what it entails to make that policy work. It's good on paper that, okay, get the data recovery, get the out-of-school students, get them back into it, and then train the trainers, make them very effective. However, in implementing it, do we really understand it? That's why I feel government role in making sure that they communicate it properly to every stakeholder, to entire community, to the people within the country, so that everybody understand exactly what the government policy represents and what advantage it will be bringing to the people. All these are very key components and key elements that should be taken into consideration in pushing such policies.
Excellent. So, but the implementation, how much of this implementation is the requirement of the governors, or is it just all national and federal that has to implement it?
So, sorry, I didn't get that.
So, how of this implementation, when we talk about implementing, you're right. Governments around the world, and I help write some of these things. We write great policies, but if we don't implement them, it doesn't matter, right? So, so in Nigeria, if you say that it's important that there be implementation, which I agree with, who has the responsibility of implementing these standards? Do the schools fall under the control of the governors, or are all schools a responsibility of the federal government?
Okay. First and foremost, all hands have to be on deck. We are all stakeholders in whatever our nation or what we desire for our nation. All stakeholders, all hands must be on deck. But primarily, the government that is introducing the policy understand the policy. So breaking it down to the nitty-gritty to ensure that everybody within the system, within the country, understand the direction is the first and primary most important thing that the government must take into account. We must be able to know that, okay, this is what this policy represents. This is what this policy intends to offer. These are the direction the policy must take. If that is done adequately, then the ministry is saddled with education. Then all the operators within that sector must now come in alignment to understanding that, look, this is what it takes. The policy comes like a statement, like you rightly said earlier. However, there are different components to it, which every stakeholder must know how, when, and where to execute and to implement it. And that's the only way we can get a very good result. So whoever it is, so I don't want us to put it out. Is it the government? Is it the parents? Is it the schools? Is it the teachers? But from point A to point Z, we must educate so we must first identify all the stakeholders within that system. And then everybody must be educated on what pertains to them such that they will be able to effectively deliver their own part and portion of it.
No, I agree. Listen, the stakeholders are critical and making sure all the stakeholders understand. But I would think, I see this around the world as well. One of the most important stakeholders are the parents. The parents have to feel and understand that educating their kids is critical. Do you see that that is a real problem in the country?
I didn't get that. Sorry.
Do you see that, one of the most important things is ensuring that the parents have buy-in, that the parents support educating their children? Do you see that one of the biggest problems with even these new policies is that the parents don't understand the importance of educating their children?
Yeah, to a larger extent, the parents many times do not understand the nitty-gritty. All they just, most times, parents just want their children to go to school, come out, become successful in life. Many times, except for educated parents or largely exposed parents that understand some of these things, but majorly, especially in our rural part of the world, they just feel like, okay, education is a means to an end, right? However, you know what this new government is doing, introducing the entrepreneurship and all that, it will help a whole lot if parents understand fully well. You understand that, okay, if my child is not good with knowing books and all that, but they can learn trade, however, within the 4 walls of the school, they will be literate and they will also be equipped with skills acquisition at that level. Then parents will know that, look, you have no choice but to go to school if you're going to make anything out of life. Because if you drop out of school now, there are no options, or there are very few options of you actually surviving. So when parents get to understand these dynamics, then they'll definitely know that, look, you just have to go to school. It's not just an option. Because unfortunately, lately, with the advent of this the digital age, a lot of our folks have access to the phone, and that is helping to an extent. However, it still gives a lot of illiteracy on our part, because we have access to phone. We can do A or B or C and make money. Then we don't see the importance of getting properly educated. So that because what will help our society at the end of the day is if you're properly educated. Because this is one of the things we're doing in the foundation we run, the Peat Philips Foundation. What we do is that we're teaching younger ones communication skills and leadership skills. We believe leadership can be acquired. And we also understand that we must know how to communicate, regardless of what field of endeavor you find yourself. So we take it on ourselves that, look, at a young age, we need to start passing on this relevant information. And so if they are properly equipped, then whatever field or whichever field they find themselves in, they will easily excel.
No, no, those are what your foundation is doing is critical to the future of Nigeria and the youth there. Because I have this philosophy: small trees grow into big trees. If you don't properly take care of the small trees, they're not going to be quality good big trees. So, by the way, do you think that the deployment of the ICT is helping educational standards in Nigeria?
I didn't get that, broke up a bit.
I know. It's my accent. People complain about my accent all the time. But do you believe that the deployment of the ICT towards education has been helpful?
Okay,
The ICT, the deployment of the ICT. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So tell
okay,
me what you think about the deployment of the ICT. Yeah, yeah.
okay, if I get you correctly, yeah, deployment of ICT is critical. It's very essential that we take the digital world seriously, because the world has gone digital. However, we must marry both. You understand? Conventionally, where we're coming from, our exposure, you need to understand the basics before you jump into that platform, the digital age. The digital age is where the world is at the moment, and we need to catch up seriously. However, we need to understand the basics. We need to know how to use it. You understand? Not knowing how to use the digital platform properly will also become anti, don't let me use the word here, but however, it will not work well if we're not properly equipped to jump on that. That's where it is right now, but we need to do proper work, getting everybody ready for literacy. We need to have a literacy level that is almost at 90%. If we can do that, then we have started well. Then the digital age comes in, because across our digital platforms, when you read through people's comments and so many things, you tend to know that a lot of people are not educated. A lot. They just they don't understand what they're saying. They don't understand what they're getting involved with. So they just do it. They just say it. So that's a bit very difficult for us.
And do you think that the growth of AI has been detrimental to education?
That's where the world is right now, and it's very key. It's very important. It's also very good. Um, that is a bit difficult to say at this point because AI is the niche and is the future. However, I noticed something about AI. When we were growing up, we must read to understand before you can get involved in conversation. Today, you just need to tap something on your AI, maybe chat GPT or whatever, Nova AI, just put it in there. It gives you the answer. You submit to the lecturer and you are done. You got your marks. For me, I'm scared about that. I'm scared that if we're leaving everything at the doorstep of AI, how do we develop as a people mentally? How do we intellectually grow when we are having a generation that don't read? Even if the attention span is so short. So, and we're bringing in AI all at once. I don't know. We may end up having zombies and robots walking the street. I don't know. So that's my fear about it.
Well, it scares me as well because, today you could go to Chat GPT and ask it to write you a story. You can tell it to solve a problem. It could write a book report. It could write the code for the computer. It can do everything. So I'm with you. Like when we were young, we had encyclopedias we had to look in. We had to actually go and research. And I think that one of the most important things and talents that you can learn in education is how to find the answer and not just somebody giving you the answer. And I'm really concerned about Chat GPT and other AI. And I see it around the world where actually some universities and some schools are banning the use of Chat GPT in education. So we only have a minute left here. You talk favorably of what the current government is doing, but if you could give one piece of advice to the current government about one change to help with education, what would that be?
Well, my advice would be simple. Ensure that those that will be implementing the policies are well versed and knowledgeable in those policies. And two, they should ensure that communication is very key. This current government, I think that's one thing lacking majorly. They don't communicate most of the things they are doing properly. I hear even intelligent people lashing out at the government for a lot of reasons. And it's simply because many times the government is not making efforts, serious effort at breaking down what they are doing in such a manner that people out there will tend to understand them clearly. And if you do not tell me what you're doing in a lay terms that I can understand, it becomes very difficult for me to appreciate your effort. It becomes very difficult for me to even align with you in what you're doing. So I think more work should be done in mass communication in terms of going out there, all the policies, breaking it down. And we're cultural people, different languages and all that. We need to take advantage of that a lot because we shouldn't lose who we are in the course of trying to educate our populace. And culturally, there are ways we can make sure Africa meets the West in terms of education, ensuring that this, even to the least man in Sokoto or in Dara or in Ondo, would be able to appreciate the direction of the government. You understand? So it's very important that we involve mass education and mass communication in breaking down all government policies.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you being on the show today, and the work that you and your foundation is doing in Nigeria is very critical to the future of the country. We must educate our youth. We must, help the parents understand the importance of education. So everything that you're doing is very commendable, and my hat's off to you. So thanks for being with me today. Um, Dane Waters, Around the World with Dane Waters. Another great show. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Thank you. Largest exporters of ivory in the world.
Of the third world nation, where your votes will get stolen if you can vote for it at all.